Good evening to everybody. Dr. Rashmi, President, IDVL has laid out wonderful program. It's a very well thought out program because everybody is occupied with practice. They have a lot of challenges, family, building their practice, their career, economic challenges, all that. But people like us, me, Rashmi, there are so many people, Dr. Asim and all, from the day one of our career, despite taking care of all these responsibilities, what I said, we have been doing a bit to various associations. Yes, it is very much necessary to nurture, to groom youngsters to take care of these responsibilities hand in hand. In addition to, I can only assure you and tell you that it gives that satisfaction, belongingness, enthusiasm, and fulfillingness. You can take it as a kind of social responsibility. And we grow together by learning so many things. And these things, what we do to the society or association, and we learn, gives us a lot of learning experience, which will indirectly help us. And I am one of the persons who have experienced this. So welcome you all, and I must thank you all for joining actively. My request is kindly join in all the programs, learn as much as possible, and join hands in strengthening and enriching IADVL. And with this, my introduction, hand over to Dr. Rashmi and Dr. Surabhi. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. A very good evening to all respected seniors and dear attendees. I am Dr. Surbhi Sanna and I am the convener of the IADVL Leadership Pipeline Committee 2022, a pet presidential project of our current president, Dr. Rashmi Sarkar. So on behalf of the IADVL EC and the Leadership Pipeline Committee, I extend a very warm welcome to all attendees and a big congratulations because there were large number of applications and you've all gotten through. So big congratulations to all of you. Now, besides your basic curriculum of the mentorship program and the leadership program, we have these lectures lined up for you. Lectures by stalwarts, international and national, and which I'm sure will benefit you in the long run for sure. So the opening batsman today is Dr. ILONA Friedan. She's Professor, Dermatology and Pediatrics at the University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine. Ma'am is a globally renowned pediatric dermatologist and she's been a past editor-in-chief of the very high-impact Pediatric Dermatology Journal. She has been a thought leader and is a major part of the AAD Leadership Institute as well. These lectures are, therefore, she is going to be starting these lectures which are being held to commemorate our Golden Jubilee year, that is 2022. So now I request our current president, Dr. Rashmi Sarkar ma'am, to please speak a few lines and introduce our speaker, following which we'll be playing the recording and then we shall have the live Q&A. Ma'am, Rashmi ma'am, if you could please speak a few lines.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Surbhi, and good evening, everyone. First of all, it's my very proud privilege to welcome all of you to the first of its kind IDVL Leadership Pipeline Program. I had always thought that, will this happen? And I'm glad, that we are seeing it happen. And that also in the 50th year of IDVL. I would like to really welcome Dr. Ilona Friedan, to this program. She's the first person to speak in this program, and I am very fortunate. I've often thought that, do I have a mentor? Yes, she is a formal mentor that I have had. Because as you know, many of you ask me that I haven't done, many people tell me, youngsters, that I haven't done a fellowship as yet. People are so sad about it. I want to tell you that I did a fellowship, an exchange visiting fellowship very late in my life, when I was already an associate professor in Maulana Azad Medical College. And I did it through the Career and Community Development Award, which I got from the Women's Dermatologic Society at that point of time. And I was able to work in the department with Dr. Friedan, that is the UCSF Pediatric Dermatology Unit. I learned a lot. And I also hope that we were able to mutually exchange our ideas, what we do in India and back. It was a wonderful connection. Besides rotating in the pediatric dermatology unit, which was very enriching, and meeting, Dr. Frieden, Dr. Erin Matz, and the other consultants who were there. They're all very well-known names in pediatric dermatology. I also learned, that how, you can behave with some of the students, make them more accountable. And I like the way she reached out, to know about me personally, the way she met me, talked about my goals in life, talked to my family when they reached there. Most importantly, also taught me something about PowerPoint presentation. If you remember, Dr. Frieden, we did discuss my slides, because so far I thought that they were really great slides, and then of course I learned, what is a crowded slide and what is not. So these are nitty gritties. Maybe these are important. This is something that even I try to do sometimes now, because, you learn, you silently observe. And this wonderful idea of the IDBL pipeline program was also given partly to me by my very good friend, Dr. Seemal Desai. Dr. Seemal Desai did mention that something like this would work well. We have been brainstorming that how can we bring some topics to India and doing this. And you will hear him in one of the subsequent lectures. But for now, today we have a very important topic. We always talk about balancing, our personal life with the professional. Does it really exist? And so without standing between you and the wonderful lecture, I invite all the leadership pipeline applicants who have made it. Congratulations. There are 20 of you, and also the IIDBL mentorship applicants who have made it. 20 of you again. Congratulations and welcome to the program. We'll go over to some reflections on the myth of work-life balance. Please do keep yourself muted in between. So Mahesh, over to you.
Hello, I'm Ilona Friedan, and I'm very pleased to be with you here today. I'm recording this talk in anticipation of a discussion we are going to have in March about leadership. My name is Ilona Friedan, and I want to thank Dr. Rashmi Sarkar and the organizers for inviting me to give this talk. Let me get myself comfortable here, and I'm going to put my screen up. This is just going to take me a quick minute. Sharing my screen, and now I have two more little things I need to do. Okay. So my talk, I entitled this talk, Some Reflections on the Myth of Work-Life Balance and Other Leadership Lessons. And I do have a disclaimer. My disclaimer is that I am from the United States, and I'm not sure how much of this is really relevant for Indian physicians and dermatologists. I hope a lot of it is, but I'm not part of your culture, and I'm sure there are some differences which would be interesting to explore in the discussion. Another disclaimer, most of my career has been spent as a full-time practitioner in an academic setting. So I don't get paid to do research, though I do a lot of research. I really get paid to see patients. And I'm making the assumption that at least some of these tips and observations will be relevant, and I certainly hope so. So when we start out our careers, there's kind of a straight line aspect to what we do. We start as undergraduates, or some of us start college and medical school as a combined curriculum, as I know is often the case outside of North America, and medical school and then residency. We think about getting a job, a career, and most of these are kind of relatively straight line propositions until life happens. And life is not a straight line proposition, and this really informs our journey. So one of the things I was asked to discuss was the idea of work-life balance. And I want to tell you right away that I do not believe in work-life balance. And the myth of work-life balance, as it's said in this graphic here, a dishonest myth, is that we're never in true equipoise. And I don't know if juggling is the right metaphor for this, but it sometimes feels that way. But certainly, I'll talk to you about my approach. And I'm going to talk to you about the idea of anaerobic versus an aerobic state as we live our lives. To me, the best working paradigm rather than juggling is really about setting a rhythm, that we are not really simultaneously multitasking most of the time, but we're shifting between one task, one aspect of our lives and another. And how can we do this better? By understanding, by self-knowledge, where we are in our life circumstances, by setting priorities and remembering that priorities change over time. So what I do now is very different from what I did 20 or 30 years ago, because when I had children at home that needed my attention, I wasn't able to do as much self-care or spend as much time doing certain things. So the overview of this talk is I'm going to talk about time management and some tips and tricks that I've learned over the years. I'm going to talk about mentorship. And I'm going to then reflect on some lessons I've learned through my journey as an academician and physician. So this is my calendar, a piece of my calendar last week as I was thinking about revving up for getting ready to record this talk. And you can see that it includes work-related things. This is, I'm doing a continuity clinic with some residents here. I actually have calendared in a yoga session that I do for people over the age of 50, which I really value. I have a leadership membership committee meeting here, etc. You can see here, I calendared in trying to finalize this talk, which I had already started to think about and work on. I don't have to go into the details, although you can see a talk here, you can see a faculty meeting here, grand rounds, you can see more leadership activities down here. But this is very typical for me, and it's really a very important way for me to get the things that I love to do and need to do done. So calendaring, making dates with yourself is one tip that I would relay to you. If things are on the calendar, they're much more likely to get done. And we found this to be the case in a mentorship program that we set up at UCSF for both faculty and residents. When we, with the best of intentions, said we really think it's important to mentor people, it didn't work until we set aside time, quarterly actually, for an entire morning where everyone met with mentor and mentee. And then afterwards, the mentors discussed where they should go in terms of helping their mentees in their career planning and other aspects of their career. Conference calls. Obviously, that's, if you add in conference calls, you add in scholarly pursuits, these are things that if you schedule them in, they will get done. And conference calls have turned out in the era of Zoom and the pandemic, of course, to be hugely possible and helpful for just moving a project forward. Things like editing. And I also put on my calendar non-work related things like exercise and family time, because I find that if I want to take the time for self-care, it works much better if I do it that way. One of the key insights that I've learned over the years is to really think about Newton's first law, which sounds very lofty, but really that law is, of course, that an object in motion tends to stay in motion, an object at rest tends to stay at rest. And Wikipedia points out that an object can move at a constant velocity in inertia as well, but it stays constant unless it's acted on by an external force, either to stop it or to move it forward and accelerate it. It's so important to overcome the inertia that keeps you at rest. And the adage, as I'll say later, if you want something to get done, ask a busy person, is related to the Newton's first law, in my opinion, that if you're busy, you already are in a state of movement and you can continue to be productive. And of course, self-awareness is the key, and having time management tools, and there are many of them, can be very helpful. So one suggestion I have for using time better is to use your biorhythm to help you figure out, are you a morning person or are you an evening person? Are you a midday person? Take breaks when you need them and use your power hour. Whether if you're a morning person, it might be between 6 and 7 in the morning. It might be between 10 and 11. But use that time to do the hardest things, the things that require the most energy. Building variety into your schedule is huge, and I'll come back to that a little later. And maximizing productivity via collaboration. And as I'll discuss, the idea that this is really not a zero-sum game. I love this book called The Power of Full Engagement, and it's helped me to think about managing energy in one way, not to thinking about it in terms of aerobic versus an anaerobic exercise state, because if we are in anaerobic state and building up lactic acid, that is literally the recipe for burnout of our muscles. And if we're in an anaerobic state in terms of our work life, that is also a recipe for burnout. So you need to have a sustainable state, but that doesn't mean you can't have spurts where you are in anaerobic state. You probably will and should. They're okay, but not in the long run. You need to be in a sustainable situation. I often use the term, I often say to people, I can't be two places at once, and that sounds pretty obvious, but it is helpful when you know that you're being pulled in different directions, and literally it's not possible for me to be in the hospital doing a consult and seeing an outpatient in my office. Something has to be resolved because I can't be two places at once. So this book I definitely recommend. And one of the things that this book talks about is not only engaging intensely in doing things, but then taking breaks so that you can recharge your battery. When I think about thinking and working for various activities, I think about things that are startup work and things that are follow-up work. And startup work requires time for deep thought and need to be rigorous when you're doing your background work, like a literature search. You need time to delve in and make sure that you have covered every article that needs to be covered. And you need uninterrupted time. This is not the time to answer texts. It's not the time to check emails. It may only be for an hour, but you'll get much more done if you really have that time uninterrupted. And follow through work you can do in the cracks. You can do with a little less time or between other things. It's easier to overcome inertia, I think, with follow-up work. But with startup work, you need to schedule that time and say, I'm going to try. And I often start by writing down with a pen and paper an outline of what I need to do. So if you are a procrastinator, or if you are procrastinating, and all of us do at various times, you need to have an honest conversation with yourself about why. Sometimes it's that someone else needs to do something before you can start, that there's a critical step missing. Sometimes you don't have your heart in it, and you really have to be honest with yourself and cut your and others' losses. If you said you would do something and really you're not going to do it, it's not fair to leave people hanging. Sometimes circumstances have changed. There's been a sudden illness. There's friction with other collaborators that you weren't anticipating, or there's way more work than you thought. So you need to figure out what's keeping you from moving forward and finding a way to resolve that tension. I want to turn now to the question of mentorship and careers. There is a lot of literature that reports that physicians who have had mentors have more career satisfaction and a more positive effect on their job experience and promotions in their field. Why does mentorship work so well? For the mentee, you're getting career guidance and support. You get real life advice and access to a mentor's knowledge and their experience. You're getting an outside perspective so that you're hearing when you report what your concerns are, you get to hear someone else's perspective. You get inspiration often if a mentor is someone who you really admire. And the relationship can open doors, which is often called sponsorship, where someone then says, listen, you're working with me. I'd like you to give this talk. I'd like you to help me co-author a paper. And ideally results in, toward the end of the cycle, in actual friendship. For the mentor, there's the satisfaction in seeing another person grow and succeed. You're leaving a legacy behind, which is so important. As you get older, as I am, because you're not going to be around forever. You can learn from that relationship because these transgenerational aspects of mentorship are so meaningful to people, so that you have different perspectives from different times of life. And it's so important to give back. I think those of us who are dermatologists and in medicine know how fortunate we are in many respects, and people helped us along the way. So it's incumbent on us to help others. In the United States, we've become very, very enamored with the idea of long distance mentoring. We have a very large country geographically, as you do. And long distance mentoring works really well, but you need to find the right match. Both the mentor and mentee have to make a time commitment. We find in long distance mentoring, which I've done through the American Academy of Dermatology, through the Pediatric Dermatology Research Alliance and other venues, it's important to pick a time and stick to it. 30 to 45 minutes is often optimal for a telephone call or a video call. Establishing goals and setting the time frame are important, and preparing before you talk. So specific questions or topics need to be proposed. And I would mention that often the agenda should really be set by the mentee. It's not the mentor's job to wax eloquent and give pearls of wisdom out of context. It's up to the mentee to ask, what are the questions I need answered for myself at this time in my career and my project, and propose those. And it's important to then set a meeting time at the end of the session so you can have your next session. This is setting aside the important time that's necessary. And keeping what's discussed confidential is critical, because trust is a key component of mentorship. It's also fine to have a mentor who is your boss, but if you do, we have learned that it's very important to have another mentor who doesn't have the conflict of interest of being your direct boss. So now I want to turn to just some things, reflections I have about my journey as a leader and as an academician. First and foremost, when I set out to be a physician, I just wanted to be a good doctor for my patients. I had no idea, and no idea that I could become a leader, to be honest. I didn't see myself that way. But as I look back on how I ended up where I ended up, I think certain characteristics were important. I've always been someone who had a lot of opinions about things, and this was true of me as a child. I was the middle child of 4 children, and nobody really listened to my opinions all that often, in my opinion, but I certainly had. I'm often motivated by curiosity. It's really one of my core values.
Tripolia.
And something I have a little bit lower down here. I don't accept what people tell me, but I like to think I learned to do this without being confrontational or arrogant. But by using this adage, it's important to be right, but it's also important to be nice. So asking questions to me is a very important tool. I like to solve problems, and I like collaborating with other people. So this has been important to me in my leadership journey, to be able to work with other people, because I don't really like I'm an extrovert. I don't like being just by myself. And I like having a seat at the table because I do have opinions about things. So problem solving, having a seat at the table, these are all things that have led me to this point. Lessons that I've learned along the way include the following. There is a myth of a zero-sum game, and what that means is that you're using time. If you're using time for one thing, it means you're losing time for something else. And I don't believe that that's true. Think about your own sense of time and those times when the time just absolutely flies by because you're completely immersed in something, or it feels like it's flying by. You're immersed in something. And then there are other times when things just drag on relentlessly. So time is really an interesting entity, because it isn't completely linear as one might assume. And of course it is in the literal sense of minute by minute. But I find that by engaging with others and using teamwork, I create more time. And by engaging in passions, I feel that there's more time, because it gives me more energy, and that allows me to do more. So I think it is important to learn from others and not and along those lines, when you enter into leadership positions, it's so important to ask questions and don't assume that you're supposed to know what's expected of you. Ask for guidance, ask for what the goals of this endeavor are. I know my first AAD committee that I ever sat on, I had no idea really what the purpose of that committee was. And I didn't speak up and ask, like, what at the end of this year, what should we have accomplished and what are we here for to accomplish? And I feel like I really wasted that opportunity. I don't think I was a very good team member, but it was partly because I didn't ask for what was expected. And by asking what's expected, often it saves you from reinventing the wheel. And by learning what others have done before you, also, you don't end up doing what they've already done. A critical aspect to me of leadership is surrounding yourself with people that you like, people you enjoy being with, and people who share your core values. So finding your kindred spirits, to me, that gives me energy. It makes me want to do things, even if it means more time away from personal pursuits. But the corollary to that is to try to avoid or give wide berth to the people who are cynical or negative or don't believe things can change, people who push your buttons. And for me, actually, those are hot button issues that I put down. I don't like people who are cynical or arrogant or think that they're better than other people. That pushes my buttons. So you need to figure out and avoid the people that do push your buttons. And there are some leadership training tools for that as well. So there are many leadership training tools. The one I referred to is called the Hot Button Survey, which usually you do in conjunction with a leader who's experienced in interpreting it, but it's actually very interesting. The Myers-Briggs is another excellent way to understand whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, whether you think of things more holistically or whether you're someone who likes to break things down into very small components and put them together. And there are many other leadership assessments and tools. And while I sort of was brought into these, dragged into these because I didn't really understand how they would help me, I have found many of them to be very helpful. And I think that if you can do them in the right context, they can be helpful to you as well. There are, of course, many leadership and self-awareness books. There's a great leadership reading list at the AAD, which is being updated to be an annotated bibliography. And there are, of course, websites about mentoring and other leadership topics. Self-awareness is really at the core of becoming a more effective leader. You have to understand who you are, what your vulnerabilities are. You have to learn to be brave and ask for feedback and not assume that you either did a great job or a bad job, but really find trusted people who can help you and be honest with you about what you can improve, but also what you did well. You have to really think about whether you're denigrating yourself or whether you're around people, others who are denigrating you, which really gets into a negative loop. Practice saying no is important, but I will argue that practice saying yes is also important. And then you have to ensure that what you've done by self-reflection is that you're making good decisions. These are a list of core values. There are many core values, and you have to figure out, and for example, orderliness would not be a core value for me. Partnership would be a core value for me. Physical appearance, I admit I'm pretty vain, but I don't spend hours and hours on that every day, so probably not really core value. Connecting up to others is a very important core value for me, as is creativity. So you need to look at these and figure out what are the things that really drive you, and then try and find opportunities that are the best for those. So here are some aphorisms and concepts that I think about frequently. Perfect is the enemy of good. I think perfectionism is a huge pitfall for people. I found this to be more true of young women I've mentored than young men, although I think it can definitely cross genders. But if you try to be a perfectionist, you don't get as much done. And I think it really leads to burnout as well. So trying to just find the best possible thing you can do without being perfect. Political capital is important also. If you are someone who's worked really hard and everyone's learned to rely on you for certain things in a committee, you also have that earns you the right to ask for something in return. If you've worked very hard and collaborated with someone, you might ask them to give a talk at your conference or to recommend you for a position. Many, but you don't want to just build up your capital, political capital. You may want to spend it down as well. I have a close personal friend who has a great expression, do one icky thing a day. And that's really a way in time management speak to find that thing that you really don't want to do. It's not something you're going to enjoy, but you have to do it. For me, that's often we have these professional trainings through work that I have to do on things that aren't even relevant to me, like certain kind of patient safety modules, doing my maintenance of certification. But I have to do these things. So I will try and do one a day. And by doing one a day, I check it off my list and I write lists to myself. And I love the feeling of checking it off or crossing it off. I have found that the idea of humility but rigor is a really good way for me to make sure that I'm not becoming a jerk, even if I am considered to be someone who's very well known and respected, but having very high standards for myself, certainly, but not too high because I want to avoid perfectionism, but having high standards and rigor is important. And if things aren't going well, it's important to find someone you can vent to and talk to, but it's so important to pick the right person. So if I am having a problem at work with someone, I will often not talk to people at work initially. I'll talk to a close personal friend and try and explain to them what's going on. And just having a good listener helps me to work through the problem and decide what I need to do next. Or find someone at work that you know you can trust their confidentiality and do that. I think you have to consider where you are in this journey, whether you're beginning or you're mid-career or late career, in terms of how you do things. All of us are busy. I think that goes for beginners as well as mid-career, as well as later career. But it is true that beginners should say yes more than they say no. But as I said, you need to ask questions about time involved and be realistic, because what you don't want to do is say yes and then not deliver. That's going to not head in a good direction. I've already mentioned if you want something done, give it to a busy person. This really maximizes Newton's first law. That person has figured out how to use energy efficiently, but you don't want to overburden people. And it's much more important to widen the pie and delegate to more people or involve more people to get work done. And that's another way that work is not a zero-sum game. If you get other people to help do the work, there's less for everyone. Engaging with leadership opportunities leads to many new frontiers. You discover strengths and abilities you might not have known you had. This certainly happened for me. I did not consider myself to be a natural leader in any respect. You meet kindred spirits along the way, and these people often become very close personal friends. You also find out what you don't like and learn to avoid those things. So I would just sum up by telling you that my leadership journey has been a lot of work, but it's also been a lot of fun. And the payoffs have been both tangible and intangible. I think above all, I really treasure the friendships I've made along the way, the transgenerational aspects, which become more important to you as you get older. I have traveled a lot to wonderful places, and I feel so lucky to have been able to do that. I've learned a lot about myself as a person and what parts of myself to try to keep in kind of tighter control and what parts I could let open up more to others, making a difference in the lives of others, which is, of course, why I went into medicine in the first place, and the importance of leaving a legacy. So thank you for your attention. I know we're going to have a chance for some questions now, and I really appreciate, again, deeply appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And
so I think that was awesome. All of us were very engaged and we were looking at all those tips and we were trying to think that, yes, we have been there sometime, done that or not done that. So I think we are now open for questions. I could see a couple of questions coming in the chat box, but maybe you will have to summarize it into few short sentences. Thank you so much, Dr. Frieden. That was a lovely lecture. And I've anyway talked to you about some of these things, when we've had our chats, sometimes sitting across having dinner, that is when, I've learned certain things from you, Dr. Erin Matz, and everybody out there. So I think the first person I saw was Vignesh, Dr. Vignesh Narayan. He's from PGI Chandigarh. Vignesh, you've asked many questions. Could you summarize them into maybe one or two questions and then, Dr. Frieden could take them? Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, wonderful talk, ma'am. I just had a few questions. Like, for example, you said that follow-up work is actually much easier, but I find that doing follow-up work is more difficult because you're trying to perfect something, whereas when you're doing it for the first time, you're just trying to get a draft out. And it is actually more challenging to do a follow-up work. And I personally feel that if some new task comes that you're going to do for the first time, I often give precedence to that rather than doing the follow-up work because it is more demanding to do the follow-up work.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good example of trying to understand yourself. For me, I think partly because I've done so much editing, follow-up work, I'm in that editing mode, and I got very fast at it. But you're right, in the beginning, I don't think that it was maybe quite as easy. But I think that's a very good point. You have to figure out what takes energy, and if you're someone who loves to put ideas down on paper. The other thing I would say is, I know that most of you are much, much younger than me and are probably digital natives, but I find that analog thinking is different than digital thinking. And I have pads of paper where I sit and write down things because I find that uses a different part of my brain than the computer. And so for creativity, I think that that's actually a good technique. But when it comes to the sort of more tedious things, then I think it's maybe not so much about the energy, but it's about the schedule. Like, I've got to get this done. And it may be something that's a burden, but I'm going to schedule it in because it's what you really don't want to find yourself in the position of starting kinds of bunches of things and not finishing anything, because that doesn't do you or anyone else any good. So that's, I hope that's helpful. Yes, in terms of advice.
And I just had another question. Suppose that you have two things at the same time. Is there any like scoring system that you use to decide which is more important? Or...
No, I don't think I have a formal scoring system. I think it's, we all have deadlines and you have to respect your deadlines. And I'm here in a hotel room because I'm on vacation, which I think it is important to take vacations, but I realize I have an overdue review of a journal article. Oh, I better move that to the top of the list because you don't want to repeatedly be late. It's okay to you don't have to be the first person to turn in the work, but you also don't want to be the last person. So I think you start to figure out by scheduling and prioritizing how you're gonna navigate that. But there's no magic formula that I know of.
So is it okay to reschedule your already made schedule in case something new comes up? Or would you stick to is it okay to reschedule your already made schedule, or would that be procrastinating or cheating in a way if something new comes up?
I think it depends on how much bandwidth you have, really. I think if you feel like you're somebody who's going to be energized but still be able to meet your obligations, then I think it's okay to take new things on. I mean, the analogy of juggling is not inappropriate. I mean, we are always weighing and balancing, but I don't think it's good to get overwhelmed, and I don't think people function as well when they're feeling overwhelmed. So you sort of have to navigate that. And everyone finds their own way. I mean, I think that understanding whether you're an extrovert or an introvert and I guess we're all on, it's on a continuum, so people are in between sometimes, is pretty important because people who are more introverted make enormous contributions, but it's often in slightly different ways. But I think one of the things we learn is that their contributions are just as important. So we want to structure group situations so that they help and they get a say in what's going on.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you, Vignesh. I think thanks for starting, asking the questions. And I think these questions come to everybody's mind. I can see that Sanjay Kanodia had asked some questions. Sanjay, do you want to put it down?
Yeah, good evening, Dr. Ilona. It was wonderful to interact with you, and I must thank our president, Dr. Rashmi Sarkar. We say Amitabh Bachchan of our dermatology fraternity, and you are the El Pacino of the dermatology from Hollywood, we say. So my question.
I hope I have a good voice, like that, so.
So it's on the part that I have seen your profile today. I was just searching about it, and I was very interested to see your profile with the whole of you have more than 350 of the papers. So I was amazed to see the things. And I'm really wondered to know that how you balance between 5 of the important things in our life. That is the academic, the professional, the clinical career, and the last 2, which we should consider the first, the family and the personal life. So what's your priority list in these 5 things? This is one part of the question. The other part is that we feel burnt out at one stage of our life, that we feel exhausted balancing all these things. So what's your key to balance all that thing? And what's one single thing which motivates you? These are the 2 simple questions of mine, ma'am.
Oh, those are hard questions. Well, I think the talk in its totality shows you that I don't think that there's a simple, straightforward way to balance all these things, and that they are never in complete, perfect balance. So it's accepting the messiness is very important, and because otherwise you'll drive yourself crazy and those around you. I think it's also accepting that you're not, this is maybe a local situation, but when my children, we have Halloween is a very important holiday, say, in the United States. And
yeah, please keep yourself on mute, please. Yeah, right. Yeah, thank you.
So just an example for me, I was not the person who when the costumes, I would go to the store and buy them for my children. I did not sew them myself or have great creative ideas. So I just accepted that was like not something I was going to do as well as some other parents might do that. So I think some people like a much nicer house or neater house, and I kind of accept mine might not be the neatest house in the world. At the same time, I found that someone asked a good question in the chat that I noticed about, do you believe in no work at home and having a no work at home policy? First of all, my husband, he left the room. We're in a room together. Having a spouse who really understands and is supportive of your choices is very important, because if you have a spouse and they literally don't understand why you would want to do any homework essentially at home, that's not going to really work very well for trying to spread your wings and do more, because you're doing those things not because they pay the bills. It's not part of your job description in terms of the payment. It's part of your job description in terms of your aspirations and your creativity. And I think it's important. My children, they may tell me that I think they're very proud of me. I think they also maybe would have liked it better if I had been able to pick them up from school at 3 o'clock instead of having them stay until 5 or 6 o'clock. But those were choices that we made as a family and that I made. And I don't look back with terrible regret, but nothing is ever exactly the way you want it to be anyways. And we don't have all that much control over so many things in our lives. I mean, I think about that when I think about the world right now. I mean, these people in Ukraine, I mean, many of them are colleagues, and you know, they didn't choose the situation they're in. So there's no guarantees, that's for sure. So you want to find the things that you really, that spark energy. I guess that if you say that there's a single thing that I ended up using as a motivator, it was, in a way, a kind of enjoyment, a sort of a mix of enjoyment and doing good at the same time. It was enjoying myself, which meant to be curious, to ask questions. I am a very curious person, as I said, but trying to partner that with doing things that would help others at the same time. And that's, I'm so lucky that I was able to do that. Some people just have to sit, you know, at a factory job, and they're no worse or better than me. It's just life circumstances that they found themselves in.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And we say namaste and thank you from India, ma'am.
Thank you.
So I see a question from, I think there's from Pooja. So I think Pooja could go first, Pooja Kandamaru, then Rohit, I see a hand up, then perhaps Arushi. So you can just summarize quickly so that we can take up more questions. Thank you.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Frieden, ma'am, for this wonderful talk. My question to you is, like, you know, as a pass out, you know, from residency, ma'am, what were the biggest challenges you faced as a beginner? Like, you know, and how did you overcome them?
So I think it's a great question. A lot of what you do depends on very specific circumstances. So when I finished residency, I mean, things are different now, I grant that, but when I finished residency, I would have loved to practice pediatric dermatology, because what I found as I went through residency was that was my real passion. I really like general dermatology a lot. I don't mind seeing adults, but I found that it was a difference between liking and loving. I liked general dermatology for me, but I loved pediatric dermatology. So in the beginning, there were no jobs available in the place that I wanted to live, in the San Francisco area. So I took a job as a general dermatologist. But I kept my interest up to the point where I would volunteer to run a pediatric dermatology clinic on my own without being paid. And that really led to my position at UCSF 6 years later, when I was offered a faculty job. So I think finding the part of your job, you don't have to even understand why you might love contact dermatitis or pediatric. You just have to feel, just like in a romantic relationship, like this is the one, and this is the thing that gives you the most gratification for now, and that can change. And then trying to pursue and angle that for people who love derm surgery, but maybe they didn't get into a fellowship. You can still slant your practice toward that, or find ways to continue your interest. So one of the important lessons is, things don't end after you finish your training. That's the foundation. That's the building blocks, but it's not the end of the story. And when people look at my CV and they say, oh my God, she's written, you know, more than 200 articles. Yes, but that's over a period of 35 years. That's not like I did it all at once. It's just it just built up over time. And the other reason I have so many articles in PubMed is because I collaborated with other people where they were doing most of the writing, and I was just gave them an idea and worked with them on it. So there are lots of ways that you can kind of answer that question for yourself, but I would say use your own just internal sense of what is enjoyable for you, and also, you know, what you have natural talents at, I think, is part of it. But even more than your talents, I think you can get very good at lots of things with a lot of practice. So it's really finding those things that you really enjoy. And ideally, it's finding things that you enjoy that are useful to other people. You know, that to make yourself useful is something that ends up making you more successful.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for answering
You're
that
welcome.
Dr. Rashmi, you're muted.
Next to go is probably Rohit.
Yeah.
And Surbhi, you can just have a look at the quick questions, because after Rohit, I think there's one more person who had raised her
Hi,
hand.
Dr. Rashmi.
Okay.
Hello.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Dr. Ilona. And it has been a nice talk, and I'm really happy. And my main concern here is being addressed in very first lecture. My main concern is time management and same personal and professional life imbalance. I'm into practice since 17 years, but still I feel that I am very poor in time management. And every time I have one question, what I feel that is affecting my personal life, my professional life, and because I am very poor in time management. How? Because I am seeing patients at my clinic with appointment only, but I cannot return the waiting patients also, walk-in patients also. If I am having appointments daily, maybe say 90 to 100 in the morning, I am getting the appointments. Okay? I am giving appointment on a fixed duration for every 5 minutes, but I have kept time for waiting patients also, walk-in patients also. But still, the patient who is coming in the very beginning, in the morning hours, and I am making them wait for 2-3 hours. That is also, I feel, is not ethical on my point. So I'm very much, I feel very disturbed when I make the patient wait, or if I send them back also. And if I'm attending them, I'm affecting my personal life because I'm getting free at late timings. So I was having appointments till 6:30 today, for example. Okay? I was having appointments till 6:30, but I got free at 8:30. And I was having lecture at 8:45 here. I ran and I came here and I was not able to meet my family. I straight away attended the lecture. So this is the thing. How should we manage and what is the right thing? We should be blunt. We should do, select ethical, non-ethical, or we should think our personal things. So it's very confusing for me. So I'm not able to find out the way to manage the things like that. Time management, personal and professional life management. So this is my question. Can you help me out in that?
Well, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to really solve the what you outlined, which sounds like a very difficult situation. But I guess I would say a few things. When I think about, first of all, there are formal tools, and I think that Power of Engagement book is one that you might consider reading, although reading takes time too. One thing I do a lot of is I listen to audiobooks. I go for a walk and I listen to audiobooks. So for me, and you can do that with self-help books too, for me, that's a way to use time. So I'm doing two things at once, really. I'm exercising and I'm also learning. So I think that's a good way to sort of double dip in a way. In terms of having an overwhelming clinical demand, I think about a few things because I've faced that many times in my career, that there are too many patients, there's not enough providers. What do you do? A couple of things. One is you have to, you can't help everybody, and you have to understand, like when I get emails from places like all over the world and they want me to help them with patients, sometimes I have to say no. Sometimes I'm really like, it's just like, I know I can't help everyone in the world who has a pediatric dermatology problem. So by saying that to myself, you have to learn to say no to some of that. One of the things that we have done in our practice is we have secret slots for patients. In other words, building into the schedule, if you know, and these are time management techniques too, if you know they're going to be on average 10 walk-up patients, you can't be two places at once. So it's not a personal failing that you can't see more patients, because nobody can see patients in 2 minutes and do a good job. So you're literally have to realize that you're talking about the laws of physics, which you do not control, right? We cannot be two places at once. And you have to figure out how it's going to work for you to make it sustainable. Because if it's not sustainable, you're not good for yourself or anybody else. It's not, getting a heart attack at age 45 or whatever it is not helping anyone, including you or your family. So you need to sort of figure out what the priorities are. And if sometimes it is a personal failing and people spend too much time looking at their email or looking or doing video games or things like that. But most of the time, it's not a personal failing. It's a matter of
Right.
setting priorities. And sometimes that requires pulling back and like literally doing the math. Like the math of what you're saying is that, you know, there's too many patients and not enough time. Well, you either have to hire more people, train physician extenders, or, I mean, again, I'm not familiar with the Indian system well enough to know, but you can't do it all. And you're going to have to be the one who helps set the priorities. And if it's not sustainable, you have to find a different path. So I know that doesn't completely answer your question, but those are the reflections that I have on the situation you laid out.
Yeah, right. Thanks a lot. We need to set the priorities. That is the key thing. I think so.
Yeah.
And I think, Rohit, at the end of all our discussions, I think we'll be in a better state. I hope so, you know, in the next 3 months.
Yeah, you're right. That's why I'm here.
Yes.
Yeah, and I really want to commend Rashmi for spearheading this leadership program, because I think that Mary Maloney in the United States was the person who did that for the AAD, and it was very visionary because we're all pretty smart. We're all smart people. That's how we got to be doctors. We had to kind of be pretty smart to get to be physicians, but none of us, very few of us, were ever trained in leadership skills, and it was such a revelation to realize that, you know, and this is borrowing a lot from business, to be honest, that there were formal ways to do this, and that we should consider, you know, that.
Yeah,
thank you. So who's next actually on the list? Yeah.
I think Dr. Pooja and Dr. Shreya Poddar have asked the same question.
Yeah, Pooja has already been through.
Yeah,
so
Dr.
I can see Atiya's hand is up. Be very brief because we have to take up questions. Atiya, do you want to go next? A quick
Yes,
question.
ma'am.
If there's a
Thank you.
repetition, then don't, you know. Then.
Yeah, I'll do that. Very good evening, ma'am. It was a great learning talk from you. I just have one question, that how can we manage working in a place which is not very friendly? Like sometimes we have our co-workers or seniors who are very aggressive or antagonistic. So ultimately we end in carrying the spillover emotions to our work or a home. And that just affects the bottom line of our productivity. So how to deal with such seniors or co-workers? And have you ever been through such a situation?
Yes, those are very good questions, and they're not uncommon. And I I think that's, in our culture, that's beginning to change, and there are certain behaviors that have become unacceptable. You know, we've now finally, after years, had surgeons who were very high up who got fired because they threw instruments and did things that were dangerous. I think the first question to ask yourself is the behavior something that is dangerous? In which case you kind of have a moral obligation. You know, if someone came to work drunk, you would send them home, right? You wouldn't let them take care of patients. But I think the best strategy when that kind of thing happens is to find your allies, to find the like-minded people, to have a private confidential conversation with someone who you think might share your point of view, and then to figure out a strategy. And I think many of us are conflict averse. We don't really like having conflict, and if that's the case, I completely understand that. But one of the things that you know, you may find that other people share your opinion, and usually they do, because people are not oblivious to these things. If someone is in too much power, you would then have to, and you can't confront that person. You have to decide whether or not you're going to be forced to live with it or not. I mean, in the end, it's a decision that you have to make. You may have no other choice, or feel that you have no other choice in an employment situation. This is the best thing you have, in which case you can think about professional coaching is something, and I think Rashmi knows this, and it sounds like you will all have professional coaches who can help you to navigate ways to make suggestions and strategize and try to shift the conversation a little bit. And this is something, and there are a lot of tools at the AAD that if you get to go there, you know, leadership conferences, but I think it's an ongoing perennial question for many people. And there are bad actors out there. There are people who are very angry and bitter, and they take it out on other people. I think in my talk, I said, give those people wide berth, try not to get near them. And when I hear them, I just try and stay away from them and find the people who are positive, because I don't think those people are going to do me any good and anyone else any. And I know that's not a complete answer, but I hope those are some helpful suggestions.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Dr. Sheetal Pujari. And then I think next one should be Shreya Poddar probably, isn't it, Surbi?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, thank you for that wonderful lecture. I have a query actually. See, I work in an institute. I head the Department of Dermatology in my institute. So I have seen seniors as well as colleagues, so if we want to have a work-life balance, they try to make it sound like, we have never, bothered about this. We want to work, we have always worked overtime. So why are you protesting? That kind of a situation. And with this online thing coming, we are always on the social media, WhatsApp groups. So, it is like, there is no demarcation between my work and my personal life. So how to deal with such seniors or colleagues, who make you feel insincere, though your quality of work might be better than theirs and you finish your work in a certain amount of time, but they are extending their work time. So we are also expected to do that. So how to deal with such colleagues or seniors, ma'am?
I think that's it's a common and a very hard question, because it really depends on if there's any negotiation or power in the situation. I have given advice to a lot of young colleagues that if they can possibly afford to, they should actually not work 100%, because what's considered 100% is not sustainable. And if there's any financial way, and I think there's no shame in this at all, if there's any financial way they can work 80 or 75%, that's actually much more reasonable, and that will give them a much better life in the long run, because of this whole issue of sustainability and aerobic state. So and many times that's possible. Actually, again, it's very individual, because some of these people, they have a spouse who's also a physician, because it's often the case that physicians marry one another. And so they really have two incomes, and making a little less money isn't going to mean that they won't be able to put their food on the table or send their children to school. It might mean a less fancy car, but those are really important things to think about, that just because everyone around you is making more money, that doesn't mean that that's the goal. The goal is to find sustainability and enjoyment in your life, and you're not going to look back on it if you've just been pressured. So that's one strategy to those high expectations, is to say, well, that may be good for you, but I have young children at home, and that's not going to work for me. It's a hard conversation to have, but doing part-time work can be a solution to that. And I think there's nothing wrong with that if it's something that works for you financially. I think beyond that, I think you have some important allies in the whole work-life burnout, in the burnout surveys that, now for the first time at our medical center, the administrators are suddenly paying attention to trying to help doctors, which they, it kind of felt like they never really, all they wanted to do was monetize us. But now they're saying, we have to make sure that people stay, because we realize if people leave, that costs us lots of money, because we then have to train other doctors, even if we can find them. So I think that there are social trends, I hope they're happening in India too, that show that the best way to avoid burnout is to figure out ways to allow people to have sustainable work life. And there, it's an epidemic in medicine right now, burnout, especially with COVID. But I do think that you have some ammunition that you might not have had 5 or 10 years ago, that basically says, you don't want us to burn out, do you? That's not going to do you any good. So you do have that. Because they know that burnout happens. These people are not stupid. They're just trying, if they're going to wring every last bit out of you, and then, that's not going to work for them either in the long run. It's a lot more work for them for you to leave, and then they have to find somebody else to try and replace you. So
Rashmi,
you do have more power.
may I just have a few quick questions?
Yeah, Dr. Reddy. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Freiden. Now,
Yeah.
when you have so many responsibilities, especially when it comes to meeting the deadlines, which aspect of these gives more stress, whether it is academic, whether the general responsibilities, or the some family commitments?
No, that's a good. It depends on what stage of life you're at. I guess for me, my children are grown, so they, it's not. I think about them, and I don't always feel good. I feel like, oh, I should have called my son the other day, and I didn't because I was too busy. But I think it really depends on the stage of life that you're at as to which feels most important.
The reason why I ask this is, once we accept academic responsibility, we have to fulfill that, and that leads to more stress. The rest of the things, some amount of compromise, adjustability is permitted. So that's exactly what I was trying to figure out. Too many in that we have to figure out which is more important.
I think you do have to figure out priorities, but I don't think that they are mutually exclusive. That is, I think there are many people who do more than one thing and do many things and do them well. But the secret sauce, if you will, is in trying to. It's not that they're doing many things well all at the same time. They're shifting through things. But again, it goes back to that question that someone else asked about in your career. You have to find the things that you're really good at, that hopefully someone needs, and that give you a lot of gratification. If you can find those three things together, that's the best situation, right?
Thank you. Now, when we say we start profession at 28, 30 years, and you think that retirement is at 60, when is usually the peak age where you will be handling too many responsibilities? When you think is that graph should start coming down from the peak of
Oh, it just varies so much by personal circumstance and by people. I mean, I don't even want to tell you how old I am, but very old. I mean, I'm still very active. I'm doing this lecture. I definitely work. I see less patients than I used to, for sure. In the last 5 years, I would say. So, I think after age 60 or 65, it's very hard to keep up the clinical demands, because that part of your energy starts to diminish, in my experience at least, and I think in general. But administrative, by then, if you've done a lot of scholarship and administrative work, some of those things are not so difficult and don't require as much energy. So those are can still be going up. But I think, and in the beginning of your career after residency, you're learning a lot just by practicing, because it's on you to take care of the patients and do a good job of it, and you're constantly learning. And I think that for people who have finished residency, it's very important. You want to believe, you don't want to just go out and start seeing patients and divorce yourself from learning opportunities, because then you're going to get less good. You're actually going to end up being worse than you were when you finished. If you're not continuing to learn, you're not actually keeping up and staying where you need to be. When you forget how much you got taught when you were a resident by people who read articles and wrote articles. You have to keep it up, so it really, the life cycle will depend on lots of things. I think people having children is probably one of the biggest, time uses a lot of time, and it has to, because they're dependent on you for many years, 18 at least.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Rashmi, you're muted. I think one question Dr. Shreya can ask, I think.
Shreya, yeah.
Yeah.
But if please don't repeat if you have, because already a lot of things have been answered. So if you have something else.
Good morning, Dr. Frieden. It's an absolute honor to be interacting with you today. Ma'am, I wanted to ask that I particularly lack in networking skills, and I think that is the first step that is required to build and nurture friendships and good working relationships. So how to kind of break that wall, or maybe what is the correct way to approach our seniors and let them know that we would be interested in working with them, under them. So yeah, that would be my question.
Yeah. I think that when people, some people may not have the time to take on a mentee, but I think one of the things that, as putting my hat on as a mentor, I think that when people come to me and they're pretty specific about the things that they saw that I've done that they are interested in, that's more compelling than if they're just like, I would just like to work with you, because they've really looked carefully at your body of work and they've said, I'm really interested in how you developed a collaboration network to do research. I'm really interested in this particular topic, and here's why. Not just, because the part that I think as a mentor you really don't want is people who, and this is maybe a very Indian, you don't just want people who are going to sit at your feet and just soak up knowledge. That's actually not very gratifying as a mentor. You really want it to be a two-way relationship. So if it becomes something where, and if you feel like you could assist them, like you have an idea and you just want to run it by them, but you want to start off, you don't want to come on too strong, but you do want and the first step is making a time. Could we sit down for 15 minutes because I wanted to just talk to you about this, or could we have a phone call for a half an hour so I can discuss certain things with you? And importantly, for crucial conversations, and I think this is something that we didn't touch on, but it's a leadership skill, is to write an agenda for yourself. What are your talking points? What is it you want to say? Make it in, don't just assume that you're going to be able to at the time remember everything, but write down what are the specific points. You don't want to be too formal about it, but I think those things help people for crucial conversations.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Dr. Akash Agarwal, very quickly, because we don't really have much time.
I need to actually take off soon too. So yes.
Yeah, so quickly, Akash, maybe, and Abhirami would be the last, I think.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am. Thank you for the lecture. It was really motivating. Ma'am, my question is that in our constant strive to, be good in our field, we often come across self-doubt. Like I personally sometimes feel that, maybe what if I'm not that good? Or because that happens when you see a patient or when you're doing some work. So, ma'am, how do you address that? And is it something that you also feel sometimes? Like, I know maybe not, but I would like to.
Well, I certainly felt that when I started. I mean, the imposter syndrome is the way that's described as, like you don't really feel like you're really that good, and you're kind of a fake doctor, fake dermatologist, because you're not really where you think you should be. That is very, very common. There's lots written about that. And I think you have to temper that with the idea that, what you really owe patient in that situation is you owe them an approach. You can't answer everyone's problems and you can't cure everyone, but it's really where working with others becomes so important. Like if I have a problem that I just show it to another colleague. I feel like I still share cases, even though I'm extremely experienced. And I think I've seen this. I feel now that I'm a very, very good dermatologist, but I know that there are going to be things that I can't figure out. And even if other people can't help me figure them out, sharing them makes me understand that this is just a really tough situation. So I kind of believe that, and I've come to believe there's no such thing as a stupid question. For example, I think if you just say, I don't know, maybe I'm just not seeing this today, or maybe whatever, but can you take a look at this? And if someone goes, oh, that's obviously X, Y, or Z, great, you've learned from that experience. But I think you have to make yourself open and vulnerable to getting feedback. And this is something that was mentioned early on in this session. Finding people who can give you feedback honestly, both positive and negative, is hugely important for a leadership journey. Like Dr. Sarkar said, I criticized her PowerPoints. I said, no, you have too many lines there. That's too crowded. Font is too small. and in the end, you know, I don't think she liked it at the time, but she was appreciative of the feedback because it helped her to give better talks. And when I give talks now, I ask someone who I know, who I trust, and I say, you know, take a look, this is a new talk, and give me feedback at the end on where you feel the energy dragged and where you felt it picked up, so that I can make it better. And so I think self-improvement is, if you don't have a feeling of self-improvement, then you're not going to get better, and everyone wants to get better. So I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So last to go would be Abhirami, because I'm sure there are more questions. We can always take them up later.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so we'll do it, you know, maybe one-to-one.
Good morning, ma'am. It was such a wonderful experience to hear you speak. You've already addressed most of my queries and others have asked as well. However, I would like to raise this question, ma'am. I am a person who normally maintains a journal. I plan my day ahead. I plan my week ahead. However, it turns out that few events which I had planned earlier do not turn up the way I want. So I end up skipping a section of my day. And that really gets to me. And because of that, I do not want to look at my journal again, because that's a realization that I have not done that. And I end up messing my whole week. So how to overcome such disappointments and push ourselves ahead?
Yeah. Well, I think one technique that I use that's different than a journal is a checklist. And so I have right next to my computer on paper, I write down the things that I need to do. And then I check them off. And then every day or so, I completely rewrite the checklist. And a lot of times things carry over from the last checklist that I didn't get done. And if that happens, I try to move those things up and, you know, those are obviously the icky things I talked about that I probably didn't want to do. But I realize I'm wasting too much mental energy worrying about this. I just need to get it done and get it over with. And if not, and I talked about the procrastination tools, you know, you need to then have an honest conversation with yourself. Maybe this is something that someone else needed to do something before you can do it. So I think there are tools for time management and procrastination, but to me, rather than just putting it in the schedule, having a checklist is a better way for the things that you don't exactly know where to schedule. And ones that maybe take a shorter amount of time, you get done more quickly. But that to me is the best way. That's my own tool for productivity, is having a checklist. And I have one always by my, you know, and for me, it's in paper. I like it on paper better. It's just much more, I don't have to open up any kind of electronic device. It's just right there.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think with that, probably because it's been a wonderful session and I can see it going on, you know, maybe even for 1 hour or more.
Yeah, well, maybe we could schedule something else in the future, but
we can.
I'm very happy that people ask so many questions, because one of the things we find when we give lectures, and you know this too, Rashmi, is that if there's no questions, and it really means that the lecture probably wasn't very good, and that people, you know, it didn't get to what people wanted, but clearly you have an appetite for discussing these things, and it's great that you're going to continue with this conversation.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
Thank you so much, Dr. Freidin. I know that you have a busy schedule, but you were the first to agree, you know, to go for this. And I'm sure that they've learned a lot. We can come back again, because I know that there are lectures, you know, we can come back maybe after a couple of months, because by that time they would have also gone through these sessions. And, you know, do enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I was very lucky to have worked with you, you know, on a personal front, I have to tell you. And many of the things work, you know, even in the American setup, the Indian setup. When you have less time, I think you have to prioritize, you know, what you're going to do here in the evening. For me, it was spending time with my children, maybe that particular time in the evening, which I had, you know, that was during that crucial time, my child, you know. So with that, you know, we will be closing the lecture now, but I will turn it over to perhaps Surbhi and Dr. Dinesh, you know, whom I see is the secretary of our association. So Dinesh, would you like to say something if you're around, the Secretary General of our association? Okay, Surbhi, if you would like to, you know, close. And we do have the next lecture coming up. That will be in April, towards the end of April. But before that, we will be interacting with you, maybe giving you some material to work on, both the leadership as well as the mentorship committee. Surabhi, do you want to close this?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Ilona. It's been wonderful listening to you, interacting with you. And we know it's really early for you in the morning. You're out with family on a vacation. So
Absolutely.
really appreciate you taking out the time. And as on a personal note, I think there were so many take-home messages, but the one that stuck with me was engaging leads to new frontiers opening up, something that was very similar to my New Year resolution. So that's one big take-home for me, and really enjoyed your lecture. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for interacting. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you so much. And namaste.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye. Bye, everybody. We will be in touch with you. And although the next lecture will come up in April, but your actual leadership pipeline will start somewhere at the end of April. Isn't that so, Surabhi?
May beginning, yeah.
May beginning, but before that, we'll keep you engaged. We'll try to send you some material. We'll have with the international speakers and then some Indian speakers. I've talked to Dr. Reddy also. We'll
Thank
have
you.
a...
Thanks for the enthusiasm and active participation. That is really heartening.
Right. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
And for the mentorship people, we have already matched you. So we will be setting up the program. You have to talk to your mentor and set up. So have a good weekend, whatever is left. Thanks for joining us at 9 o'clock. But, that's how we work. We are evening people and this is morning in America. So you'll be, for international lectures, you have to join in more. I see Saloni also there, Saloni and Dr. Sunil. Dr. Sunil, if you're there, just say a few words before we sign off. Are you there, Dr. Sunil?
Yeah, I think he's there.
2 lines from Sunil and then from Saloni, if he's there. I'm trying to find him on the other screen. Do share these pictures on your social media. I'm trying to take up with pictures, but even you can. Is Sunil there? Dr. Sunil Dogra. Okay, Saloni, over to you.
He's more of a writer than a speaker.
Okay. We need writers also and we need speakers. Saloni, can you unmute?
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, everybody. Heartiest congratulations to all the candidates who've been selected for the leadership and the mentorship program. I think there are a lot of take-home messages, and I think these activities are really going to help not only you, but all of us in building capacity. And I think that's something that Rashmi ma'am has been focusing this year on, capacity building and future leadership. So I think all of you are going to be, I hope all of us also are going to be the future leaders of tomorrow. And, hopefully lead our association and dermatology in general onto higher levels on the global platform, as well as, in India as well. So congratulations again and best wishes. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Saloni. So please have dinner if you've not had. Please, also enjoy the rest of your weekend and don't work too hard, this weekend. That's all that I can say. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Read a book, see a movie. Yeah.
Good night.
Yeah.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night, everyone. Take care.
Yeah, good night,
Thank you, ma'am.
everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Yeah.